feel like we should also quickly touch upon container size.
Yeah.
It seems with organics, it's often said that the bigger the pot size, the better. Talk to us about pot size.
Yeah, it's a bigger buffer. And what I mean by that is if you're in a small container, it's doable. So when I first started learning, Gascanistan was on the forum and showing his grow, and a lot of us borrowed from the vision we saw. He had like a room that was full of like Home Depot buckets. There were like 100 of them in there, and they were just stacked. Bamboo poles everywhere. It looked like you're going to gouge an eye out just walking in there. But it was in 5 gallons, and he would literally just dump it out on a tarp, re-amend it, and plug them back in and go. And I'm like, dude, that is epic. And around that time, a lot of people were saying, well, what happens if I just don't dump my soil out? So they were just making compost teas and keeping the same 5 gallon there and planting right back into it. And it became clear that if we grew a pretty big plant, a 5 gallon container was almost root bound and cannibalized to the point where re-amending it or recycling it was probably the better way to go. And so to offset that, we didn't want all the labor. Like literally dumping 100 pots on the ground in a tarp, shoveling it and putting it back in was it's no small task. And while it sounds great on paper, when it's the 5th time you've done it and you just don't want to do it anymore, you're looking for a better way. And the no-till became the goal. And Mountain Organics, Blue Jay Way at the time, was starting to do back-to-back no-till cycles, and everybody was increasing container size. A lot of guys were growing like 100-gallon pots. And then we wanted to see how far that went. And it seems like there's some magic somewhere around container size that we're still learning, like a big container, but still getting close to maxing out the volume creates a better finished product than one that's so big you never even come close. But what we found is that doubling your container size usually increased your yield by about 60%. And there's a lot of studies that show why. We found that plants are intelligent, and because the nutrients aren't immediately available in soil, they're dependent upon the speed the biology can feed them at. And in a 5 gallon container, if we consider it like a bioreactor, we put organic amendments in, and biology breaks them down and feeds them to the plant. When our plant really starts growing, because we get the grow room dialed, the grow lights are good, or we're in the sun and it's just raging, good environment, greenhouse, whatever. Now the biology just all of a sudden can't keep up. Your plant is growing faster than it can keep up with. The way to bypass that is to give it more soil. So now the root, instead of being circling on itself looking for new food, can just go further away from itself looking for new food. In fact, the world record tomato grower, he would do this. He would make his own compost, he would make his holes, he would mulch it, and he would irrigate it. But then he'd go plant vetch, a nitrogen-fixing plant, like 8 to 10 feet behind his rows. That would grow and fix nitrogen in the ground. When the plants got bigger in their growing season, their roots would tap into the nitrogen the vetch produced, and they'd hit a surge of growth, and they would never run out. And so the bigger container size started being the mimicking of the earth of what would produce more yield. I mean, you can see the guys in Cali would put 400-gallon containers out, grow 99 plants, and they were all 10 pounds plus. So we knew bigger could be bigger. But as far as indoor goes, if you're calling a 4x4 space your space, a lot of people were hesitant to add more soil. They're like, 5 gallons, a big container, that's plenty big. But when you do it for a while, it just seems so small. You look around, you're like, well, I can fit way more in the same 4x4. If I'm growing 4 plants in 5-gallon buckets, what's the difference if I just make them 30 gallons? It's still a 4x4 grow tent. And what we found was the difference was significant. In a 30-gallon or 100-gallon, something that really was more soil per canopy. So 5 gallons times 4, that's only 20 gallons under your grow light. But if you put 30 gallons, now you're talking 120 gallons in the same 4x4 space. And now you just didn't run out of food. You didn't have to be an expert at feeding and making the right tea. And then when you were done, you used less than half of what was available. So you could arguably guess with some craft blend and still have a pretty balanced soil. And so what we tried to do, just like life, is take our highs and take our lows and flatten them to a curve that was more manageable. A big container of soil makes the big harvest, it's just like this. It's not like you're depleting the soil. And when you flatten that curve, it seems like everybody gets better results. Now, are there people that are using smaller containers and living soil and doing well? Yes. A lot of times they'll use maybe a little bit less light intensity to grow really high quality without driving the plant so fast it outpaces biology. Or they will flip to flower significantly sooner. Or they will put it out on the patio when it's just a small tomato plant. They're basically not trying to overgrow what they're using. And so I think in living soil, what we need to do is picture the final size of our plant and try and match the soil somewhat similarly to that. As above, so below. And there's no breaking that rule when it comes to organics. So to fill a 4x4 canopy completely, full of yield, I think the best way is to fill it full of soil. Here's the other side of it though. When you're brand new, if you really don't know about watering, you could easily underwater or overwater a 100-gallon plant much easier than a 5-gallon. A 5-gallon or a 10-gallon, you can lift it and you can go, "Ooh, that's way too heavy." Even I can tell that. I'm brand new, but that seems way heavier than day one. That probably has plenty of water. Where when you have a 100-gallon or several 30s, you're kind of slapping them and lifting them and like, I don't really know. And so then it becomes that you must know that your watering style is working. And we have some rules of thumb for that, but that really does determine your container size. A lot of people will ask me how to choose their container size, and I always recommend maxing out as much as you're comfortable with. That's always the better answer. The caveat is learning to water. So in a 4x4 space, I love doing 15 to 30 gallons times 4, or a 100-gallon or a big planter. Now, in a 4x4, I prefer a 3x3 planter if I'm going to use something square. Then I can step a foot in and reach to the back. I can have some airflow where the tent's not right on my grow container. So a 5x5 tent would be great for a 4x4, but these are rules of thumb. You can break every one of these rules. The reason why experts can break rules is they know the consequences of that and they offset it. So if you're in a small container and that's all you can do, keep your light intensity a little lower. Keep your plants a little smaller before you go into flower. And I think that will make significant quality differences. In organics, we're not trying to just maximize yield. We're trying to increase yield so long as quality is brought up with it. But if there's a cost in quality, we'd prefer not to do that. And that's what we found. So I hope that people listening to this may be encouraged to go up slightly in container size. I find that 10 to 15 gallons is the minimum to start no-tilling, in my opinion. You can definitely do 5s, but it's not as easy. Our last 10 by 10 series are 5-gallon containers. We had 3 of them on a drip system. They were ugly the whole way and harder to deal with and took more daily interaction, but they produced what's finished product now is you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. It's arguably just as good, if not better, than the other ones. But what was better than the other was the yield and the effort. I got way more yield for way less effort. And to me, that's why bigger containers is very attractive. So
This clip is brought to you by AC Infinity. Use discount code MrGrowIt15 to save on any of their products.